Okay, here we go. I'm having a chat with trumpeter composer Jacob Dalager about his 2021 Tonzan, I love pronouncing it there, Tonzan
Yeah.
CD release, Paradigms, the music of Anthony Plogue. And we're going to chat about Anthony Plogue here in a bit. And here are the musicians, by the way, that are on this particular CD. Of course, Jacob Dalager, trumpet.
hmm
That's why his name comes up all the time at the beginning. You're playing trumpet on all of these, but you also
Yeah.
have some pals and colleagues and friends. I'm thinking of
Yeah.
Daniel Allen. I hope I'm pronouncing his name properly.
Yeah.
Organist Lauren
Daniel.
Geist. I hope that's
Yes.
close. Soprano, Gregory Scott Stewart, narrator. And this is a
Yes.
very interesting CD. I'm talking to all you guys out there, faculty members and performing musicians who are looking for repertoire. This is really a dandy CD. Thank you very much. Again,
Oh, thanks.
those of you in the trumpet world, I'm sure, know of Anthony Plogue. Uh, and so you're probably way light years ahead of me. But for me, it was quite a fun experience to see a CD that's entirely the music of an American
hmm
composer and in his field, because Plogue is also
Yes.
a professional trumpet
Yes.
player.
He's an
Uh, the,
incredible trumpet player.
the
Yeah.
pieces are three miniatures for trumpet and piano from 1996, Thoughts for trumpet and organ 2010. I liked the way you did this little mix of colors and stuff. So
Okay.
it's a nice overview.
You noticed that. I'm glad.
I promise you I'll let you talk in a minute. uh, Paradigms for trumpet and piano from 2012. I think I mentioned Thoughts for trumpet and organ from
hmm
2010. Postcards for solo trumpet, 1994. I love that mid range of the instrument. I love that
Mm.
kind of middle range. It's just kind of potent. From 1994, Musings for trumpet and piano from 2014. Two scenes for trumpet, organ, and soprano, 1974, from the
hmm
poem The Hills of Morning. The poet is David Lamont. I hope I pronounced that
hmm
properly. Animal Ditties 2. There are, I think, three of them, as I recall, three or four maybe, for trumpet, piano,
Yeah.
and reader. And the reader is reading from the poems of silly, fun poems of Ogden Nash. The piece was composed in 1983. And then last on the program is a really very longish. I think it's maybe the
Yeah.
longest piece on the program,
It's the longest one. Yeah.
and quite that's okay. Nocturne for trumpet and organ, and when we kind of get to it, I want to kind of see if you can help me understand some of these wonderful colors
Yeah.
that could be done between these various combinations of instruments. Okay, Jacob Dalager.
Nice.
Uh,
Thanks for having me, Dan.
well, thanks for
Pleasure
picking up
being
the
here.
phone.
Yeah.
Assistant professor of trumpet and jazz at New Mexico State University in Las Cruces. Is that a nice town, or does it
Oh, it's
snow?
oh barely. Like we
Okay.
get like a dusting once a year. It is
Okay.
beautiful. The mountains are gorgeous.
Yeah.
The weather's great most of the year, and the food's wonderful. Yeah. No, it's pretty idyllic.
Okay, and before his idyllic move to New Mexico, Jacob was in the Washington, D.C. area, if I think I can
hmm
put that generally speaking, principal trumpet of the Washington Chamber Orchestra. You
hmm
got your doctor's degree in music performance from Catholic University in 2020. That was like yesterday.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It was like I graduated into the pandemic.
That's
So
nice.
yeah, and then it's
Because
been a
then
blur.
there's
Yeah.
silence for 2 years, right, or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
So yeah.
that's really impressive. The a master's degree in help, master's from
Masters
Eastman,
in music. Yeah.
from
From
Eastman School of
Eastman.
Music in
hmm
2012. So I guess, oh, now that's very interesting. So was there a pause? I just noticed you got your master's
Yeah.
in 2012 and then you got your PhD in 2020. What's that about?
Yeah, I had gaps between all of my degrees, working backwards. So between my master's and my doctorate, I just worked. I right after Eastman, I moved to Singapore actually, and I taught and performed in Southeast Asia for 2 years.
Uh-huh.
I played with the Singapore Symphony, the Taiwan National Symphony, Malaysia, etc. And I taught a lot of lessons as well and freelance. It was a lot of fun.
So you
And then
freelanced for a while, like a whole
yeah,
lot of us, myself
yeah.
included, and then said, "This is horrible. I'm going to go get myself a collegiate job." Right?
Yeah, pretty. Yeah, it was. I was very slow to realize that's what I wanted to do, but yeah, eventually it took me. So what? Like 4 years in between my master's and starting my doctorate.
Hmm.
But I really loved freelancing. It's not enough money and not enough insurance, you know.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, exactly. But otherwise, the variety of it, and it's a very exciting
Speaking
career.
from my
So,
point of view, because I'm now at an age where I'm getting Social Security and other good things. Once
yeah.
you get to that point, it's home free because I'm officially poor in terms of the U.S. government, which means all kinds of perks. So my entrepreneurial freelancing career, which is still going on, that's the downside of it. Somehow I've squeaked through reasonably well, but of course I always have that thought, damn, you know. Why didn't I listen to my father? About getting a degree and a job.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so I think we've just about exhausted you, but we've got these credentials from Eastman, and that's pretty important, and having
Yeah.
your doctorate and all that good stuff. Now let's talk about a little bit, and I'm going to let you kind of tell me more about Anthony Ploug. Born
Hmm.
in 1947, so he is still alive, as am I. Thank
Yeah.
you very much, everybody.
Yeah.
American composer, conductor, trumpeter, born in Glendale, I had to say, because that's
Yeah.
right down the pike a bit for
Yeah.
me.
He's a neighbor.
And this is a man also, in terms of a freelance career, if I understand it correctly, playing major trumpet positions in major
Yeah.
orchestras. I mean, we've got, even the secondary roles, you know what I mean, for Los Angeles Philharmonic, the Standby Jazz Band, I mean, Los Angeles Philharmonic, Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, Malmo Symphony
Hmm.
in Sweden, I think, Basel
Correct.
Symphony Orchestra. So he's had this huge
Right.
life as a professional musician, Stockholm Royal Philharmonic and all.
Hmm.
And and somehow has had time to teach and do
Hmm.
workshops, I presume, and also compose like crazy. I had a
Yeah.
look at his composition list, and man, he's written all kinds of stuff, as I mentioned, including
Yeah.
I think I'm okay saying 4 operas.
Okay.
Maybe the count was 5, but just that alone, to me, it's like, my God, that must have been a lifetime right there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
prolific, 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 and again, I think I mentioned to you that the name was sounding familiar. So I think he's very, very well known certainly among brass players and trumpet
Yeah.
players. I think in this country.
Yeah. I think he's really well known in of like a few years. I think he's really well known in the orchestral world
Mm.
of a certain generation. You know, he hasn't done orchestra work seriously for a while now, but yeah, he was principal in San Antonio and all the schools, those orchestras you mentioned, Malmo, Stockholm. He subbed with all the big orchestras, you know, New York and Chicago.
Yeah, there you
Played with all of them. He was also a very successful recitalist as a, you know, a solo trumpet player. Toured the country all the time. Um, you know, we're talking a few decades ago, 70s, 80s, and then also released a number of solo CDs, some of which I think are like really set the standard for some trumpet repertoire. Um, and then over his career, he started writing, you know, while he was playing, and but gradually wrote more and more, and eventually transitioned to teaching position, teaching college in Europe, teaching at music schools in Europe, uh, primarily in Freiburg, Germany, but also in Oslo a little bit, so that to enable him to find more time to write. Um, the story that he shared with me is that, you know, he was at a concert and listening to Prokofiev. He didn't tell me the particular piece, and he just was so moved by it, and he just decided. And he had been writing and thinking about writing, and hearing that Prokofiev, he's like, you know what? Even if I don't make it, I need to say that I had the same job as Prokofiev, and I need to be a composer. And so that set his trajectory to work more and more towards making that his full-time job.
Okay, let me see if I understand this because I find it really, really interesting. So I'm kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit.
Yeah.
This idea of a professional musician playing with all these orchestras, seeing all these conductors,
Hmm.
and performing all of this repertoire. So that's before a moment arrives for him when he says, am I got that correct? You know what I mean?
More or less. I mean, I think he had been writing, dabbling in writing before that. It wasn't like,
That
you
makes
know,
sense.
black and white.
Yeah.
But I think like the yeah, that was the spark for him to like commit himself to that a new path
Just like even
going
conducting,
forward.
I
Hmm.
presume, because I know friends, colleagues that watch all these major conductors go through. And man, can musicians be cynical. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
And judgmental. But, you know, it's true, frankly, about a whole lot of conductors, you know. Anyway, so that I find very interesting. And
Yeah. It's a
now
good
you
story.
need to let me know because isn't there something? I'm trying to think of a city. Isn't there San Antonio? Is
San
there
Antonio.
anything? Tell me when you met him and what's going on with you two. That's what I want
Oh,
to know.
yeah, how did we meet? So, at one of my colleagues that I went to undergraduate with, Michael Wilkinson, he's now principal trumpeter of the Pittsburgh Symphony. Um, he went and studied with Tony Plogue after he graduated from our undergraduate school, St. Olaf College in Minnesota, and like had glowing, wonderful things to say about the experience. And he learned a lot, and Tony was so generous and helpful. And so when it was my turn to graduate a few years later, I reached out to Tony to discuss that same possibility. And he was very open and receptive. And we, I decided not to do that. I spent a year volunteering in, instead, basically because I had financial barriers to do that. I would have loved to have done it, but it
May I
just didn't work.
congratulate you once again for your job at New
Thanks.
Mexico State? Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So it didn't work out that time, but it kind of just set in motion our relationship. So we just kind of stayed in touch off and off throughout the years. I played some of his music at my master's recital, and then while I was doing that, working on my master's at Eastman, I kind of digging through his repertoire, a catalog. I kind of had realized that there's a number of pieces that hadn't ever been. I couldn't find recordings of them anywhere because he's so prolific. I mean, they'd been performed, I'm sure, but like no, I couldn't like study them to choose if I wanted to play it or not,
Yeah,
um, which is really important when you're picking recital repertoire.
sure.
So that kind of planted the seed in my head for this album back in like 2012, back at the end of my master's.
Isn't that amazing
Yeah,
how the time, how it's
yeah,
not an easy process. Everybody that I talk to knows this, and so we all commiserate and talk about it, but the general public doesn't have, they have to
yeah,
understand it's a long, arduous process to get a CD
yeah.
done.
It's true. But then I did have the privilege of meeting him in, I think it was 2016. I was doing a music festival in Graz, Austria, and had a free weekend. I said, so I emailed Tony. I was like, I'm finally in the neighborhood. Can we get together?
Nice.
And he was nice enough, and we had a long weekend. I just went over to his house, and we just played trumpet for 4 days and talked about music. And he showed me some of the sketches he was working on, and I talked about my idea of recording some of his music that hadn't been released before, and he was very enthusiastic about, generous about that idea. And then I did one of my doctoral recitals about his music. My lecture recital was about studying his compositions, and then it finally, and then it was supposed to happen right after that lecture recital, the recording process. But then of course COVID hit, and eventually a few months into the pandemic, I just called everyone I had been talking to about recording. I was like, you know what? We're just gonna are you up for it? Let's just do this. We don't know when this pandemic's gonna end. I'll stand 10 feet away from you.
Oh,
And ever
wow.
and so
Nice.
we recorded in January and February of 2021. So like still
Wow.
the height of the pandemic. So everyone was masked up except for me, of course, because I have to blow into my instruments. But I would just stand as far away as I could and social distance, wash our hands, all that stuff. And yeah, that
Leadership.
finally came together. Yeah.
Leadership. And that's a compliment. Obviously, it's a compliment to you. But here's what I did during the plague. I said to myself, "Oh, this is a great opportunity. I'm in, lockdown. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to get caught up on every single CD review that I need to get caught up on." And then I
Uh-huh.
stared out the window on the empty streets for about a year
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
state of complete kind of really comatose state. I could not concentrate on anything but the disease and the fall of
Yeah.
democracy. I mean, it just my head was
Yeah.
just not in it.
It
So
was a
anyway,
hard time. Yeah.
congratulations to you for getting
Thanks.
focused in that time
Oh, thanks.
and getting things done. How long did it take roughly? Yeah, I saw 2 days of recording, but you kind of
Yeah.
mentioned the chronology a little bit. But then you get everybody. Did anybody say no? I'm afraid I don't want to do this.
No, thankfully everyone was really game for it. The only, yeah, well, I shouldn't even talk about that, but yeah, never mind. Yeah,
Okay.
it was fine for it. Yeah,
Except for that one
there,
person who
well,
stormed
there
out
was,
and broke windows.
yeah,
Okay.
no, there's everyone was enthusiastic about it. There's one person who maybe like their, their employer was like not enthusiastic about
Mm.
uh potentially putting themselves at risk.
I see.
But they worked it out, and I can't say, but yeah,
Okay. Well, that kind of explains then you've given me this
but it
overview
all
of
worked out.
the overview of also how you and Anthony Plough kind of
Yeah. Oh, and
put it together. Oh yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna forget to say, and then I sent him recordings of rehearsals and of the, the rough edits of the album and everything, and he was very generous and supportive throughout the whole process
Oh,
of
that's nice.
creating the album.
Yeah, that is very nice because
Yeah.
he didn't ask to be involved in that detail. So it's nice of him to
Hmm.
offer that. Very very nice. So a good collegial relationship it sounds. And of course he should be
Yeah.
grateful. He's got a whole CD of his music. Come on,
Yeah. Yeah.
come on.
I think he's happy with it and has something.
Now I saw something in your bio. We're just gonna have a little fun.
Sure.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
preparing everybody, and I'm going to regret this, I know. But I read something rather odd in your bio. Do you know what it is yet?
Did you? I'm not sure which bio you read. There was one where I wrote about extreme knitting.
That's right.
Is that
That's the one.
okay?
And I'm surprised. I thought maybe I'd see you in something, at least a cap, a fall cap of some kind. Anyway, and what is? I mean, serious,
um,
because we in music have these
yeah.
specialities and these techniques. What is it about knitting, and when did that happen?
No,
How'd it go?
no, it is totally, it's actually just, well,
Oh,
I
it's
see,
a joke.
I wrote it as a joke, and then I Googled it after I already posted that bio.
Yeah.
I Googled it then, and it turns out it's a real thing. I thought it was just ridiculous enough that no one would buy it, but it turns out
Uh-huh.
it's a real thing. There are extreme knitting, it
Yes.
turns out, it's not knitting fast, it's not knitting a lot, it's knitting with giant pieces of thread and giant needles, and it's hilarious, and I would love to do it, but I haven't. I haven't.
And also, I've seen, as have all of us on Facebook, some real serious knitters, who literally
Yeah.
knit
Yes.
everything in sight. Okay, so
Yeah.
okay, I'm glad that it was a bit of a jest, and that you
Yeah.
don't compulsively go to your knitting needles and
No.
create new smocks or
Yeah.
sweaters for people. Okay, well
I sh-
that's done.
I
We
ha-
can move on.
I have to learn how to do it now though because I put it in my bio.
I think you've gotten yourself
I've committed
something going.
myself.
I want to now just kind of go down through this program a little bit. How are we doing for time? Oh, okay, plenty of time. And the reason, as I mentioned to you, is um, you know I know what I'm talking about, but
Yeah.
I need a little help on about
Mm.
some of the different kind of uh, challenges that you encountered, and also some of the colors. I mean, some are very
Yeah.
obvious. Your use of mute and so on. So how does that sound? Let's just kind
Yeah.
of march ourselves through these. So let's begin with the first piece, and a very nice choice to kick the CD off.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
Three miniatures for trumpet and piano, because there it is. It's right in your face. Trumpet, piano, nothing
Yeah.
shocking, no knitting anywhere. Three wonderful little movements,
Mm.
and interesting. All three of these movements are interesting. What like for example, here's just some of my notes, and then you can uh, fly with what I
Sure.
have written down. That shrill solo trumpet opening is just so
Yeah.
done, so catchy, and then this kind of pointillist or marcato at least,
Yeah.
and the piano. Tell us about the pianist. I've got her her name up here.
Jo- Joseph Jungen.
Yeah,
He
how'd you
is
meet him? What's that about?
he is an absolute monster on the piano in a good way.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
Yeah.
Um, we did our masters together at Eastman,
Mm.
and uh, when I was in Singapore, he happened to visit. We did a recital together in Singapore, and then I don't know, our paths just were fortuitous, and they crossed a number of times. And then
Nice.
we both taught at Frostburg State for a while. And he's still at Frostburg State in Maryland, and I got to work with him for 2 years again. Um, and so yeah, I mean, he's one of my best friends and just an incredible musician. He can play anything. He hears everything. He's one of those musicians that's like, oh, this sounds like the second movement of Prokofiev 4, and
Uh,
then he plays like the second, he can, yeah,
I hate those
he's a,
types. I hate
yeah,
those types, really.
he's
My
amazing.
my conducting teacher had perfect pitch. He told me it was a curse. and I can
Mm.
understand that, but I wanted his curse
Yeah,
badly.
right. Yeah,
And
exactly.
also these people who are walking. I mean, I'm kind of an encyclopedia, but I know the type where they say, "Oh, well, it reminds me," and then they sit down at the
Yeah.
piano and play the fourth concerto of whatever, of
Yeah. Yeah.
Scriabin.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
he's one of them.
he's one of those. Okay,
Yeah.
and therefore doing Eastman uh,
Yeah.
is glad to have had him. Let's put it that way. He's
Yeah.
proven that Eastman's a good conservatory of music.
Yeah.
Three charming little movements: moderato, an adagio with freedom to be played with freedom. Let's have a look at
Yeah.
that one, and the allegro vivace. So it's very standard in many ways. But tell me, give me kind of overview of these three movements, even
Yeah.
preparation. What's difficult, what's not, in putting this one together.
Sure. I think well that right the strike one of the striking things about how it opens, it kicks off fast and high. And
Yeah.
I'm playing you can't necessarily tell, but if you listen again, you'll notice I'm playing into the strings of the piano and you'll hear the
I
ring.
wondered what that sound was. I could
Yeah.
not figure out what was going on there.
Yeah.
Nice. Thanks for that info.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And if you or any listeners are interested, if you go on YouTube, you can find recordings of the videos of us playing these pieces and you can see all those little details happen.
Aha. And I'll make sure and
Um,
put that up on your page as well.
sure.
I'll look them
Thank
up
you.
as well. Yeah.
And then I have to rotate while I'm playing, so you kind of get this like three more, I guess 180 kind of effect as I'm and it comes into full
Oh,
effect then as I'm spinning away from the piano towards the trumpet microphone. So it's a kind of a cool opening
that just took
acoustically.
that just elevated Plogue tremendously for me. Because you've just described what I, of course, would never have been able to. I couldn't figure out. I knew there was something kind of interesting about the sound. Thanks for
Hmm.
describing that. But also that he is well aware of spatial
Yeah.
circumstances and spatial acoustics and all the rest.
Hmm.
Fabulous. That's okay. So
Moderato. Yeah.
anything else about this? How about the adagio? I'm
Yeah.
trying to see. It's kind of a slower passage, of course. Distant
Yeah.
and lamenting. It's muted, isn't it? If it's that
Hmm.
distant,
Yes.
muted. That's a lovely sound, muted trumpet.
Yeah.
At what kind of mute I shouldn't probably have asked.
No, it's fine. He's really good at using mutes. There's two. Well, actually, in this piece we use three different mutes. We actually use what we call a practice mute, or what's the other term for it? Practice mute, or it's like basically a silent mute. It makes it extremely quiet. It's not really
That's it.
intended for performance,
That's it.
but
It's
it's
haunting. That
it's really
effect
really quiet. Yeah, it's made
because
for practicing in like a hotel or something.
I get you. That's very, very interesting to me. I'm glad you described that as well because the
Yeah.
distance thing it is very powerful and very effective. And now you have told me why it's even more effective in my to
Yeah.
my ears. It's because it's not a mute that I ordinarily would have
Yeah.
experienced. Yeah.
So the intonation is really hard to control on that.
Mm.
Yeah, because it's not really meant to be performed on. But it's a really, yeah, it's an awesome effect. And then from that we go on to a cup mute with tissue stuffed inside. So it's got that kind of cupped, you know, bottled sound. But then it also is more muted because it's really just jammed full of Kleenex.
Well, what? Who said that? Did Plogue indicate that
Yeah,
somewhere?
it's in the score. Hmm.
Huh? Wow.
Yeah.
The elevation's going higher and higher. He knows exactly the
Yeah.
colors he's trying to create. Clearly.
Yes, he
Yeah.
does. And then just a regular straight mute, which is the loudest of the options before we go open. So,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of blurring the second movement goes straight into the third move. All three movements are continuous, but
Yeah.
the movement transition, the mutes go from quietest to loudest. So
Yeah.
by the end, so the piece starts loud and the second one's quiet, and then it gradually gets louder as you go to louder and louder mutes, and eventually back to open.
Okay, so that is an effect based on these changing of mutes. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
really glad to have that information. That helped a lot, clarify a lot of what I think I was hearing, because I had no
yes,
idea really. I wasn't because I'm not a trumpet player. Can I say?
yeah,
And mutes are the subtle goodies. And this
hmm,
idea of that Plug had a notion that you fill this particular mute with tissues and it'll have even a more interesting
yeah,
sound is really that's really something.
yeah,
And then that allegro vivace is really really nice. Nearly frenzied speed. It
yes.
just kicks in.
That Lots
Uh,
of double tonguing. That was maybe the
mhm.
one of the hardest parts of the
Piano and
album. Yeah.
trumpet, kind of snipping at each other.
Hmm.
And the mutes are off. The mutes are off now, more direct back and forth between the two. That was dramatic. That moment when it just suddenly is out in your face. Everything goes in your,
Yeah.
opens up and is in your face.
Right. You kind of get used to the mutes after a few minutes, and you kind of forget, and then all of a
Yeah,
sudden it's open.
yeah.
It's yeah.
So anyway,
It's a
that's a beauty. Let's have a look at thoughts for trumpet and organ, and let me kind of throw my
mhm.
thing in, little bits in. It, First of all, of course, it's a wonderful match, organ and trumpet, for all kinds
Yeah.
of churchly purposes. We hear
Yes.
that combination a lot in churches and so on. But I find it very interesting the way Plough uses these two
Hmm.
common colleagues, if you will, organ and trumpet,
Yeah.
and really plays with them. Organ solo for a piece really starts off. Trumpet has a simple but insistent tune. The
Hmm.
organ is are the underchords more or less. I'm just reading from the top of my head here. And then there's this little syncopated. I describe it as almost a kind of laughter from the organ. Does that ring any bells of memory for you?
Kind of that.
Well
Kind
done.
of that. Kind of like rocking minor thirds
Mhm.
with like a with a left hand melody. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
then, of course, the two protagonists, if you will, speak back. They actually speak. They don't really protagonate back and forth with each other. Another solo trumpet bridge to this kind of new section, eerie, high register descending line in organ. Does that bring back some memories? And then back to that opening figure in trumpet and that
Hmm.
long sustained tone out. I loved the way the piece ended.
Oh,
Anything
thanks.
else? Go ahead and give me anything else here.
To me, this piece in a lot of ways is more of an organ feature. I love the organ part in this. Like, I mean, kind of like you were saying. Um, my part is not unlike the first movement. It's not particularly virtuosic. I mean, it's very musical,
Mhm.
it's lyrical, it's nice, but I really love the organ lines, all the kind of these chromatic twisting lines with with like triplety twisting lines, and there's like this accelerating part right in the middle where speeds up over and over and over again. I'm singing it too fast, but um, another like a really common feature in Tony's music is that you hear in this one and in the last one is like what we call hocket in music.
With an
Uh,
H? With an H?
hocket, yeah, hocket
Because
in
it
music
sounds, it's
academia.
Renaissance or something, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like when a melody is like broken up between two or more instruments. Instead of one continuous line, it's kind of like dee up, bop up, bop
Uh-huh.
up, bop
Mm-hmm.
up. But really, it should just be one.
Gotcha.
Should sound like one line connected. And he loves to do that, and it's particularly effective, I think, with the organ for the reasons you were kind of hinting at. I mean, the trumpet and organ really are the way they produce sound is very similar. They're blowing air through a metal pipe,
Mm,
right? Unlike a piano, which is striking the strings.
yeah.
Um, so the colors really can blend very well. And I think I used a flugelhorn mouthpiece with this to give it an even warmer sound.
Ooh,
Um, I played it on trumpet with a flugelhorn
gotcha.
mouthpiece.
See, these are the things you're bringing up to help me understand, and also to remind me of certain things of how interesting the instrument can be. As you said, using the larger bore, right, flugelhorn mouthpiece in a
Yeah,
trumpet to produce a warmer sound. Was that
yeah.
indicated by Ploeg, or are you playing there at that
That
point?
that was my choice. That was well kind of both. So he writes the piece is written for trumpet or flugelhorn,
Oh,
and
I
he
see.
doesn't indicate a preference.
Mhm.
Usually it's like, you know, flugelhorn or trumpet if you
Yeah,
have to.
yeah.
But this is like no preference, and I couldn't decide, and I was just thinking about the programming of the album, and there's a couple other flugelhorn things. So I was like, well, I'll do something in the middle for this piece, and I'll play trumpet with flugelhorn just to give it a slightly different color from the
Mhm.
other organ and trumpet piece.
Fascinating. Many thanks. That's good. That's good.
Yeah,
Where are we? Are we looking at postcards? Let's see here.
postcards.
Yeah,
I think
postcards.
yeah,
For solo trumpet.
or Paradigms, the title
I
track.
wondered if we had met. Yeah,
Yeah,
Paradigm,
the other
the name
P
of the
P side.
CD, the namesake for
Yes.
the CD. Let's talk about Paradigms for trumpet and piano. Let me see what I've got. Did we get a year in there? We did, didn't we, for Paradigms? Let me switch up the.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, 2012. So it's reasonably recent. It's in that
Hmm.
2010, 2012. range. What's going on with paradigms? What I see, broadly romantic, and then there's even a kind
Hmm.
of quasi jazz-ish thing going on there for a little bit, or am I out of my mind?
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, I asked him about that too. I definitely hear jazz in a lot of his writing. He doesn't, he doesn't think that way. Like he's not a jazz musician in any sense, and he doesn't um, try to do that. But it definitely like it comes out
It's just, yeah,
organically.
little, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. I think that's the best word. That's interesting to know as well what you have just described about the way he kind of uses jazz, not really directly trying to have an effect or any, you know what I mean, trying to be
yeah,
jazzy, because that's kind of the
yeah.
impression I had in Paradigms. It
Oh
just,
yeah.
there's just moments where it just kind of did a little, kind of lilted, did a little jazzy thing for a bit, and then went on about its business. But huh,
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that because one of the main things and the main features of the melody of that piece is ba 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 da dee da da da, which plays with the major versus minor third, which is what the blues really plays with.
hmm.
So da
Uh,
ba da 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 dee da 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 da, that half step on the third is really built into that piece, just like jazz and the blues.
yep. Okay, good.
Maybe that's what you're hearing, and this has got tons of rhythmic energy in it too.
And that's
There's
part of
like
it too. Yeah,
it's a five, yeah. And that's definitely yeah.
the,
And there's that 5/4 section in the
that's
middle.
I didn't know that, of course, because I didn't see the score, but interesting. And
Yeah.
I couldn't really hear, first couple listenings, I didn't really, or did I? I had to have, because I'm thinking now earlier this afternoon, of course, it's a very obvious 5/4 there, that little section now that I think about it, or is it? It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Oh, it
But
does. Yeah. I was
I'm just wondering if it's in
the only thing.
my notes, but there's something that gives it just a little, occasionally his music does a little something jazzish
Yeah.
thing.
There's a lot of rhythmic energy. The 5/4 isn't like in your face, but it's definitely
Hmm.
there, and it kind of gives that kind of lilty, off kilter rhythmic
Yeah,
energy to it.
yeah. And I just say in closing that Paradigms is accessible, somewhat fun,
Yeah.
interesting stuff, and a cute little soft pedal out. It's a cute
Yeah.
little. I
His
don't know what
endings are
soft pedal means, but you can figure that one.
well. It kind of tapers unexpectedly.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. It's fortissimo, 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 and then the last three bars.
Yeah, that last little chunk, clever.
Yeah.
Yeah, clever, just clever. In other
It's
words, to keep it 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 kept me amused. That's kind
yeah.
of it keeps an audience, it gives the audience a little thrill. Nice. Postcards for solo trumpet.
Hmm.
Where do you
This
want to
is
begin?
so. Yeah, I think I was trying to say like these. So these until this CD came out, none of these pieces were recorded before, except for
Oh,
I think this one was commercially recorded. I wasn't able to find. I didn't find the commercial recording of it until afterwards. I thought it was unrecorded,
no.
but I was recorded at least once before I did. But anyways, this is one of the more popular pieces for from Tony's catalog. I think it's really catchy in a way, and it's very trumpety. So like trumpet players love it. It's an unaccompanied piece for trumpet. It uses the first movement's like somewhat iconic. Like it uses a reference pitch, kind of like Bartok, where you it's not traditionally tonal, but it repeats this like G over
Mm,
and again,
mm,
bum bum
mm-hmm.
bum 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 bum, bum. And it veers away from it and goes extremely chromatic, diminished scales and um, weird arpeggios and stuff. But it always comes back to this reference pitch, giving you a sense of tonality. Um,
Mm.
but the whole time with this like repeated note that you keep coming back to, that kind of drives the piece forward.
And when you mentioned trumpety earlier, my little note here on this the first moderato, I couldn't think of any other way to describe this trumpety and
Yeah.
repetitive little tunelet,
Yeah.
but as other than Mannheim rockets. There's you know that little bit where the riffs go blip, blip, something
Oh,
like that.
yeah, yeah,
Which to me was very trumpety.
yeah, yeah. It is. It's, it's, yeah. The trumpet is bragging.
And then
It's a show off
then it
piece for
moves
sure.
again in the moderato. It goes into eighth notes, and that gives it again a kind of walking, moving sensibility. Um, Part of me
Yeah.
said nice exercise, and I want to qualify myself on this, which is that sometimes they are indeed, are they not, exercises for trumpet in
Hmm.
a way. You know what I mean? That is his kind of
Yeah.
training. Is how his method books. I think some are well known and all that. So I don't mean it in any offensive way, but I could kind of hear what he was kind of. I'm not a trumpet player again, but sort of the exercise, if you will, that might may
Yeah.
or not. Am I all wet here? But something that I
No,
wanted
you're
to bring that up.
no, you're right on. Very perceptive.
Okay, next movement, contemplative with freedom. Muted, that distant trumpet thing again. Long tones with hiccups.
Hmm.
You want to, I couldn't think of any other way to
Beep.
describe that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at this point in the CD, if you've been listening from the beginning, like you definitely know that he loves
Yeah.
chromatic lines, chromatic melodies, and so what is so one of the best ways to the most obvious ways to vary a chromatic line is to displace it by an octave. So it's these major seventh grace notes. Then instead of going da da da, he's going da da da
Hmm. Hmm.
da da. Should have been an octave. It's like so. It's this it's the same style, the same writing language, and just with a slight twist on it.
And then it also goes into this. I see again, if I've got my notes right here, the moderato. It's kind of what my little note that I highlighted was lots of technical stuff going on in the faster section.
Yeah,
Lots of fanfaric, I call them
yeah,
fanfaric stuff in solo trumpet. Of course, I mean
hmm,
that's what it's about, the instrument, you know.
yeah,
And it gets faster and more fanfaric and notey. Then out with a little punch, boom,
yeah,
fun, as I or you might recall.
for sure,
Musings. Are we ready? Yeah. Are we done with the postcards?
sure,
That's a
yeah,
beauty. That's fun.
yeah,
Next piece, musings for trumpet and piano. Solo trumpet meditation is that
hmm,
opening, that whole opening. Musings are suddenly rather charming as speed and the trumpet figure become a lively gallop. Does that make any sense to you? I'd have
yeah.
to re-listen to it again. Um, Go ahead. Tell me about musings for trumpet and piano.
Musings, yeah. Musings is maybe one of the at least one of the things we were going through the dates of these, right?
Yeah.
And one of the I hadn't thought about this in a while either about the dates, but this is from 2014. So this is the most recent or second most recent
I
piece
think
on the
it's the
album.
most recent. Now that you mention it,
Yeah,
2014. That's right.
yeah.
It is. Yeah.
And I think you get all the same qualities. You get the same idiosyncrasies, the same writing language that you get from all the other pieces. You get you know the essence of his approach and style in this piece. And I think it's just I think it's more accessible. It might be one of the more accessible pieces on the album. It's definitely probably the most playable
Hmm.
of the pieces that we put together. And I think it's just with the maturity. I don't know if it's maturity, and well, it is maturity, but I don't know if it's better or worse than his older writing. I like all of it, but it becomes more focused and relaxed in a sense
I
than
would say
like
that's
me.
maturity. You know what I'm saying? When you've been
Yeah,
writing and writing and writing, then sort of things kind of click, and all of a sudden everything's easier or
yeah,
something. Or you can, as you've suggested, you can you see the sensibility of it, the arc and the shape of a piece may be better
yeah.
at this point. So this is quite this might be what in your mind this might musings for trumpet and piano might be one among the most. They're all really quite accessible, but in terms of satisfying an audience,
Yeah. If someone, his stuff is not atonal, but it's definitely very chromatic. So I think,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think anyone, yeah, it's a good, let's say it's a good primer, a good amuse bouche
Hmm.
to the music of Anthony Plogue.
Okay,
Sure.
okay.
Like three miniatures and postcards. I started with three miniatures because I think it's the most exciting,
Hmm.
but it's definitely intense and like, someone who's only listened to Mozart and Arvo Pärt might have a slight heart, aneurysm listening to that. But it's nothing like Schoenberg. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah,
I
yeah.
wouldn't.
It's all
Yeah,
it's all very accessible, but
yeah,
right. It's maybe words like tart as in
Yeah,
that first piece is rather tart
it's intense. Yeah,
and intense. Yeah.
you need a breather after it. That's why I put thoughts after, which is pretty slow and.
And I got into I'm not I got into let's talk about it because I did some double X's before these two scenes
Hmm.
from the poem "The Hills of Morning" for trumpet, organ, and soprano. Um, the and the poet is Davida Lamont. I'm
Hmm.
not aware of this poet.
It's a good.
Um,
She's
go.
not a full-time poet.
Oh,
She's
oh,
um
oh.
she was a friend of Tony's, and she is a fine poet, but now she
Mhm.
does more like photography, and
Oh,
so
well,
you won't find her published or a website or anything. It's
yeah, I did
yeah,
find her photography website,
yeah,
but I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure whether that was the right person or whether that was another
it
person that was
was
a photographer. So thank
actually.
you. That's
Yeah,
also that's
yeah.
really interesting. Um, the poem is rather obscure, I think, unless I'm
Right,
a
right,
real
right.
dummy. But let's see, the organ and trumpet under soprano. I mean, the whole idea is really nice. The second scene is announced in solo trumpet, a kind of fanfare, and then the organ
Mhm.
enters. Quote, and this is the part of the poem that begins, "But in the East." That was just kind of
Mhm.
my. So when I do write up the review, I'll know where to kind of go in the text. The second scene, "We shall laughing wake to the morning." That's rather nice, you know. "We shall laughing
Yeah,
wake to the morning," and that's the end, kind of, sort of.
yeah,
Does that ring any
yeah.
bells? I mean, because I'm not sure
Yeah.
myself.
Well, yeah. So the poem is about uh
See, I told you it was
yeah.
tough.
It's about. I mean, it's talking about ghosts and like this the being. It's sort of it's supposed to be haunting. The first scene is very
Oh,
haunting. It's about
uh-huh.
ghosts. I mean, I can read. I can. Should I read it? Is that going to take too long?
I don't care. Do you want to? Because you're
It's
helping
pretty
me out.
sure. It's pretty
Uh,
short. So
yeah, I was. Yeah,
in the west, the hills have burned to gold. So we're watching a sunset,
that's right.
mimicking the sun as aging summer sets. The silent air is chill and the earth seems old. And beyond the hills, I, nameless, cry. So watching a sunset and and crying. So I remember life like a memory of a dream, like the whispers of weeds that died upon the hills.
Yeah, nice.
So it's a morning, we're listening. It's spelled the title is The Hills of Morning, but it's spelled
Oh,
MOUR
really?
and well yeah, it should yeah.
Okay.
And I hear yeah, so mourning is in
Death.
regret and death, yes. And I can hear the murmurs of a hope that died too soon, and all I see are spaces where countless were now gone.
Oh, there's the clue. There it is, the big
Yeah,
reveal right there. Yeah,
yeah. And then the second scene, then I'll just very briefly.
sure.
But in the east, the sky is turning gold. So now it's sunrise, and the
Yep.
tawny hills are warming with the sky. It's getting warm again. The light is clear, and the earth is moving. And behind the hills, a bright sound nears. And it feels like ghosts have got a warning and all at once, possessed, are turning to the light and singing morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
I watched it and watched it go by. Was reading frantically the words of the poem today while I was, preparing for this,
Yeah.
and I'm really glad you read it for us. It's
Yeah.
much more effective now. I realize
Yeah.
very, very effective. Yeah, because when you first started going on about ghosts, I thought, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And then and then it ends with the wraiths. Yes, the wraiths are growing wings to fly away forever, and with new found ageless voices, we shall laughing wake to morning. So then the morning changes
Sp-
from
yeah,
MOURN to MORN,
yeah.
and the ghosts, the wraiths, are leaving.
See, on first listening, I just thought it was about sort of nature and the changing seasons kind of thing, and I got the
Mm,
east-west bit, sunset, sunrise,
yeah,
and all that, and the burnt soil, the sun, the heat of the sun, and so on that we all experience here in California, anyway, and I'm sure in New Mexico. Well,
yeah,
thank you for that, because I really was not getting a ghost connection, and of course it's because I've kind of first experience of things.
sure,
It doesn't
yeah.
get similar, but wonderful. Okay, and nice, thank you. Animal Ditties 2 for trumpet, piano, and reader with the poems of Ogden Nash. I mean, just it's crazy. These are animals. Let me
Hmm.
list the animals: the ostrich, the chipmunk,
Hmm.
Where's the other one? Help, I've
The
lost it.
canary,
The
the
canary,
canary, and then the elk.
and then the elk. That's a beauty
Elk,
too.
yeah,
And
yeah.
these are Ogden Nash's kind of tongue-in-cheek,
Hmm.
short, cute little poems. I'm
Yes.
glad, as regarding, for example, the ostrich. I just pulled this aside again to remind me when I get sit down to write the review. The quote, Ogden Nash quote is, "I'm glad it sits to lay its eggs," and that just
Yeah.
all by itself, just you can
That's
see
hilarious.
this big, huge animal. I'm glad it sits to lay its eggs. Stuff like that,
Yeah.
just so fun. Like Help, I keep wanting to remember the other piece that's so famous. Facade with
Mm-hmm.
poems of Ogden Nash. Well, give me an overview because they're so funny. The chipmunk is shy as I.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
let's see, where's another one for Canary? There's a funny one bit for Canary. And by the way, the piano in Canary opens with that flighty
Yes.
fluttering of wings. I mean, it's all so descriptive.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The song of canaries never
Never
varies.
varies. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the elk, heroic, and the elk. To me anyway, what I was hearing was kind of a heroic sort of trumpet tune describing this enormous
Yeah.
creature. Um,
Yeah.
Rather grand and trumpety material.
Yeah. It is.
Then
Yeah.
it gets kind of positively funny, and Lawrence Welkish, that whole last
Yep.
bit is hilarious, and then for
Did you
then
hear the
out.
Did you hear the champagne pop at the end? That's what
I'll
you
have
may
to go back and listen for that.
you
I
might
don't.
it might not be obvious as that's what that is, but right at the end of the elk, we literally like opened a bottle of champagne because it calls for it in the score. Um,
Perfect.
so it goes
Perfect.
right before the last line, which is why then, when I behold an elk, can I but think of Lawrence Welk? Right before, and then right before that, there's a champagne pop. So we went through a number of cheap champagnes, getting the right like recording.
The right ambiance. That's a
Great
good
acoustic.
excuse for drinking too much alcohol. You
Yeah,
gotta get the right ambiance.
the,
Pop another,
the,
will you?
exactly. The narrator he made off really well that day because we recorded that piece first that day to let him go early, and we still had 6 hours of recording to do. So he got to walk off with 3 bottles of
Oh,
champagne.
nice. Anyway, it's just a beauty, and I'm sure very, very, very accessible to an audience. And therefore, before we talk about this
Mm.
last nocturne for trumpet and organ, um, have you performed? Tell me how many of these pieces you have performed to an audience and how they may have responded. For example, Animal Ditties. Have you performed that at all in front of an audience?
You know, this is gonna sound weird, but I actually haven't performed that because I would have, but it was just the timing with the pandemic,
Oh, sure, sure.
and then by the time I had already like moved on to new
Well, yeah,
repertoire by the time I
yeah.
performed again, um, and so I would love to, and this would go over really well. So, but I have coached my students on these
Aha. Well,
pieces.
that's the same thing,
So it's
really.
been performed vicariously. Like I had a senior play at her senior recital last year. She played Animal Ditties. I have a student right now working on Paradigms. Another student played Musings on his junior recital last year. Um, so I'm letting them have the glory now.
Yeah, yeah, and also you've mentioned a very important point. We do stuff and then we move on. It's
Yeah,
it's done and we're on to the next project. So
and
makes perfect sense.
I'm working on new Anthony Plug material that I haven't learned before, and
Oh,
I've played many other of his pieces before this record too. But
sure.
yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Let's have a look at Nocturne for Trumpet and Orchestra. This is the last piece and the longest piece on the program, as I recall. Let
Mm,
me check the year here, too, just out of curiosity again.
yeah,
2004. No,
90s.
wait a minute. 1994.
Yeah, it's
So
90s.
right in that period, I keep trying to figure if I can remember the 90s anymore. But tell me about it and the reason I'm kind of sitting on it a little bit as an end of our sort of discussion. Let me see what I've said here. But it's long.
Uh,
It's a long construct, if you get my
yeah.
drift, to kind of get through. There are extensive sections for trumpet. There's some romantic moments, larger than life. Now an expansive or that solo expansive
Uh-huh.
organ section is
Yeah.
fabulous. Then trumpet re-enters in the minor I
Hmm.
presume, as I'm thinking, kind of a lamentation,
Hmm.
I say with question mark, and then back to the solo trumpet meditation with organ chords under, and the final kind of modulation. You get somewhere tonal, don't you, by the end of that piece? It sounded like it
Yeah.
was trying hard to be
Yeah.
a, a tonal chord, but I couldn't. But I kept hearing something in there that was not that I didn't want to commit to tonality on.
Yeah. It's
Does
well
that ring bells?
again. It's tonal, but it's not 4-5-1 tonality.
Mm.
He arrives at your tonal center chromatically or through reference pitch, and so yeah, you're right. You're talking about the very yeah, and the
That
ending.
very
Yeah,
ending is
yeah. It
it's
still
just
ends with
oh
it's lovely, but it ends like this.
yeah, there is that whatever. Speaking of
It's
jazz, by the way.
yeah, right. But it's very much yeah. It's like this would be like this is an E major with an added two.
Okay,
So like or sorry E minor like so like an E minor 9 chord. So it's just
okay.
E minor, but
Yeah.
with this seventh in it. So E minor 7. I'm supposed to.
But in this instrumentation, even, I don't want to talk it to death at all, but
Yeah.
in this kind of instrumentation, this trumpet and organ, maybe one can hear that dissonance a little more cleanly or something. But I thought for sure he was intentionally trying to get there, where it would finally really resolve
Yeah.
in tonality in a tonal chord. But anyway, that was all. It's not a
No,
criticism at all. It's just fascinating, you know.
no, you're right. I mean, the ending sets it up. It sounds like it's going to resolve to just the E minor triad, and never quite gets there.
And then, yeah, and I wondered whether that was a deliberate tease, kind of on his part. You know what I mean?
It must be.
Because
Yeah.
the colors are so distinctive that you cannot
Yeah.
not hear that dissonance, which is charmingly irritating or something. You know what I mean? It's just like that little. You
Yeah.
want me to
Yeah.
resolve it? Not this time.
Right. Right.
Something like that. Anyway. Well, what else do you? What have I forgotten to ask you? What do you want to talk? Like, give me a little overview news about this CD, where you just kind of end, then we'll
Yeah.
kind of run it down.
Sure. Overall, yeah. Well,
Overview.
Nocturne. I love Nocturne. It's one of my. It's probably like you said. It's probably the biggest piece on there. It sounds one of those pieces that sounds easy, but that
Aha.
is like it's actually that was probably the hardest to put together, to be honest. Even though it's
Wow.
all very slow.
Interesting.
There's all these polyrhythms that they just sound like undulations, but
Mm.
then to like actually get the timing right is extremely tricky. Oh, sorry. So that
No,
was
that's interesting.
Nocturne.
That's really very interesting too. So thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about any other thoughts
Sure.
on?
Yeah. Kind of closing thoughts over the paradigms. I hope you check it out. It's a work of passion. I love the music of Tony Plog, and it was. I was hoping. My goal with this project is to elevate. Hopefully elevate some of his lesser known pieces. Um, every trumpet player knows postcards, but like the general public doesn't know his work as
Mm.
well. And he's written a lot of great stuff that doesn't get enough
Mm.
exposure. Especially in my opinion, the works on this album, especially
Mm.
pieces like Two Scenes, which I think
Mm.
should be played way more often.
Mm.
Um, and I think even though it was a risk maybe to do an album of all just one composer, right? Because there's obviously going to be
It's
similarities,
yeah, yeah,
but I think there's enough variety in there. It alternates trumpet and organ and trumpet and piano, and then unaccompanied trumpet, and then there's two
yeah,
pieces
yeah.
with voice, and there's so many different mutes and stuff that I think you get. You know, I think you can listen through the whole thing without getting bored, even though there's like similarity from piece to piece. I think there's enough contrast. I think there's something in there for everybody. Whether it's like kids love animal ditties, they're funny, they're cute. There's haunting pieces like Nocturne and Two Scenes. There's technical virtuosic pieces like postcards and three miniatures and everything in between. So I think, despite its singular focus on one composer, I think it's accessible and it's got something for everybody.
And because you brought it up, how long did it take you to discern what was going to be on this CD?
What pieces?
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
because you have just explained exactly
yeah.
why they are there, which is this interest in making sure there's diversity and interest and color
Mhm.
differences. But did you go through a struggle, where you're throwing stuff out and then you're bringing it back,
Yeah.
that whole angst?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I've definitely because I've played so much of his repertoire and then trying to narrow it down to
It's
which
hard.
ones are going to be on the record. And I gotta thank Joseph Union again, my pianist. I just bought everything. I got everything Tony ever wrote, and then we just played
Plowed
through all
through,
of it
yeah.
and
Nice.
tried to make decisions, and then try to make sure that there was stuff that we thought could like use more exposure.
Yeah,
So
nice.
that were also like really high, you know, high levels of music.
Yeah,
Well, real high
and high
level
levels of music
compositions.
making, and also
Yeah.
this whole business that you've about the expertise of the recording, of the recording engineering,
Yes.
and I'll
Yeah.
pay more attention as I get ready to write the review, too. So because I love that when sound is exactly the way it's supposed to be, if you get my
Yeah.
drift, and not troubled by atmospherics or a
Yeah.
studio environment, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Tones is amazing.
well, so just before I do the wind up, what's up? What's next? What's going on? When are you so burned out there isn't going to be another CD for a while, or what? What's going on? Because you
I
mentioned that you're looking at other Plogue works, and I'm just curious.
Sure. Yeah. I There's so many projects I want to do. Probably my next CD. I'd like to do it as soon as possible, which would probably be next summer to work on it. I want to go back to Maryland and work with Joseph again and work with Tone Zen, and they're all based in the DC, Maryland area
Mm,
there. Um, there's some great musicians here in New Mexico and stuff, but I'm just so happy with the result,
sure.
and
Yeah.
just um, but I have a number of my own original pieces I would like. They've been performed and recorded live, but I want to go get like a really high quality um, commercial done with my. I have two trumpet concertos I've written and some other
Wow.
chamber pieces that I'd like to go back and record.
Mhm.
So that's next for me, recording. Yeah, recording wise.
Any performances like the trumpet concertos? Have they been performed like at the collegiate level or something? What or not?
Sure. Yeah, my first trumpet concerto is called Three Futures for trumpet and
Oh, I
orchestra.
like that. But the
It's
title,
about
dig
yeah.
it.
It's about thank you. It's about climate change. It's a
Nice.
climate change composer, and
Oh, I see
uh,
funding. I see funding. Yeah,
I hope so.
next.
Yeah. So I recorded that. I played that with the Austin Symphony in Minnesota, and then last spring I played my second concerto, the Oregon Mountain Fantasia, with the New Mexico State University Wind Symphony. So that was for trumpet and wind ensemble.
Nice.
Yeah.
What are they? About 15 minutes a piece, or anything? I mean, ballpark in it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out. I'm
Yeah.
trying to put
The
your next CD together. Is what I'm trying to do.
Three Futures is over 20 minutes. It's about 22, and that one's pretty long. And then the Oregon Mountain Fantasia is more digestible, 10 minutes.
Hmm. So you still have a hole of about 20 minutes you got to fill somewhere in there.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah.
really good. Mainly topics. I'm also, in case you didn't know, being an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
arts administrator for off and on for 60 years. So I mean, right away, you've hit on topics that are fundable, I think, in this
Yeah.
day and
Yeah.
age. So, and you know that, you know how to chase all that stuff. So, wonderful. I guess we'd better wind it down. Great talking with you. I think it took us about 2 months to finally get this thing together. I'm crazy, busy, and the thing is, it all went dead, and then it went all on hyperdrive or something. I don't know, but I thought I'd be able to ease back into things a little bit, and I'm just swamped with stuff. So, uh,
Well,
great
I hope we
talking
can get
with you,
busy.
Jacob Dalager, trumpeter. That sounds
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so
I always just say that
trumpet.
sounds weird,
I
right?
think just
Trumpet
trumpet.
player. I don't
It
know.
sounds like you're on the street somewhere. Anyway, uh,
Yeah.
and composer, we now know very very clearly, and I have it also on my chart. Jacob
Thanks.
Dalager. This we've been talking about the 2021 Tonzan CD release,
Hmm.
Paradigms, the music of Anthony Plogue. He's
Yeah,
thrilled, I'm sure. Uh,
I am.
with
And he
your
is.
your colleagues and so on, and again a very very eclectic CD of the music of the same composer, but you took care to make sure there were different colors and different combinations of instruments,
Hmm.
using organ, using narrator, using soprano, and so on, and solo trumpet. So well done. I
Thank
guess we're
you.
done.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. See ya.
Thanks for having me.